All right, well, good evening, everybody. We are here in Mike's Famous Kitchen. I am Art Medina. Sitting across from me is Michael Cabrera, and
Hello.
sitting across from us is a guest tonight by the name of Mr. Roy Torres, who
Hey!
is not often. How's it going,
I
Roy?
guess I'm doing that. I guess I'm speaking into the mic.
We are here on a Thursday night, a very rare night because we usually do this on Thursday. But we're here to do a movie review for a movie that we all have come to admire because of the original movie, which was The Incredibles.
Schindler's List.
Well, besides Schindler's List, right? Exactly. We should always maintain, some kind of credence to the tribe. Mm-hmm. But for Incredibles, the new movie that just came out last week, and we all saw, is the movie The Incredibles 2, a Pixar movie that the original was released in 2004, and the sequel was just released last weekend.
That's also my. It's in my top 10 favorite movies of all time, and it's also my favorite animated movie of all time.
A Pixar movie that when Pixar began, I think in 1996, you could tell the difference between the animation from the original Toy Story, which was the first Pixar movie, to Incredibles, which was 2004. So in a span of 8 years, it was like literally landing in the new world and then landing on the moon by the time 2004 came in and The Incredibles came out, because that animation was brilliant. Mm-hmm. Michael, what were your thoughts of the original Incredibles?
The original Incredibles was tied for the best superhero movie that I ever saw, tied with Unbreakable.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? In fact, I know that Kevin Smith and even his partner for the podcast of Fat Man and Batman, Mark Bernard, they say that is the best superhero movie ever made, which is, I think it's the truth, because it sort of took every element of every kind of superhero genre, put it all into one movie, made what essentially was original characters based off influential superheroes over the course of 50 years, and then essentially just says, okay, let's make our own, and let's just give it, and let's just put it all out there. And they actually made a movie that was entertaining, influential, and incredibly action-packed, and very adult-oriented if you consider it, because it was, in fact, it was the first movie that was, it didn't have like a talking creature. It was all human beings. It was a Pixar movie where the animals didn't talk. It was human beings.
The reason they give Unbreakable the edge is because it's a guy who's depressed, who doesn't know what his place is in this world. He's in a failed marriage. You know, he's trying to save a marriage. He's trying to be a father, a reluctant father, while he's just trying to find himself, which is why I give that a little more of Unbreakable, which is my number one. I think it was my number one favorite movie of all time.
Unbreakable definitely is up there because you know what it did? It turned the superhero genre on its head. And in fact, when I first saw the movie, and I saw the movie with you, I did not know that the movie was about superheroes until that twist at the end. Mm-hmm. When it finally made this incredible sense, and it just blew my mind. But is there a difference between, live superhero movies like the Fantastic Four and the Batman series and the Marvel movies that are out there, and then this animated Pixar flick?
When you're talking about movies in general, whether it's superhero movies or sci-fi or horror, what makes a movie great isn't necessarily the genre. The genre is kind of incidental. So when you're talking about The Incredibles and something like Unbreakable, the reason that it was so good to us is that I think it resonated with us in a non-superhero way. So as Roy was saying, he said it's a guy that was depressed. We understand depression. Yeah. It's a guy who's having family problems. We all have had family problems. Incredibles is no different. I think with that particular first movie, we understood what it was like to have a family that was dysfunctional, to have angst from a teenager, to have the desire of a young boy to grow up fast. The fighting ins and outs between the husband and wife, all of those things grounded that movie. It wasn't about superhero. It could have been about anything, but the story was about the people, about the characters, and when it's character driven like that, the fact that it's, quote, a superhero film is incidental.
I had an observation as I was watching The Incredibles 2. What why does a person with powers become good? Is it they need a moral compass? Like, like Spider-Man had Uncle Ben, Daredevil had his dad, Matthew, Batman has Alfred. I think that's what made them a moral, and Superman had Mom, Pa, Kent to keep them grounded. Yeah, is that what makes someone with powers good or evil, like the Joker or whatever other Doctor Doom? They had no moral. Magneto, they had no.
A good villain has a moral code. A good villain is doing what they think is right because they think every good villain thinks he's the good guy, and in his own mind, in his own movie, he's the good guy. So, Syndrome.
Yeah, from the first flick.
Syndrome.
Syndrome.
Oh yeah. Okay.
He thought he was doing what was right by him. Right? He didn't. He was the good guy. He wanted to be the center spotlight, to be the hero. He thought he was going about it the right way. Samuel L. Jackson in Unbreakable. He thought he was doing the world a favor by revealing heroes. He didn't think he was the bad guy. He thought he was doing the right thing. So I think that moral codes are flexible, and they should be. That makes a really good villain.
Go on.
Well, it's just that there was this old thing that I always used to point out to whoever would want to listen. But, whenever you look at a James Bond movie, his enemies, and I'm talking about the very early, maybe to the mid films of James Bond, he would always go up against a supervillain who had raised money to create a company, who employed millions of people throughout the whole world, and he had this evil plot to either take over the world or to cause some kind of a disaster against a particular nation or against the world. But the thing is that if you consider it, the supervillain was smart enough to, go from whatever he was at the start to something big. I mean, he's actually an inspiring figure. And James Bond has got to put an end to him because he's now become like an evil genius and now wants to take over the world or do something to it. But you got to give credit to the villain for having achieved what he achieved up to that point when he gets defeated by James Bond. So in Syndrome, for the first flick, if you have to put it, he was such an ingenious creator, an ingenious inventor, that he could have used all of his gadgets and all of his creations to actually make the world better. But because he had a chip on his shoulder against Mr. Incredible, he decided to use it to basically, number one, make himself powerful, and to also, make a point that, he should be the hero. And the way to do that is by causing death and destruction until they need me to stop that death and destruction.
But here's the thing. Here's what I would argue, that Syndrome, Mr. Glass, and those James Bond villains, those guys are insane. While Thanos and Killmonger from Black Panther,
I was going to say that.
yeah,
Wow.
Thanos, the plants are overpopulated. If I eliminate half of them, I could feed more people. Killmonger for Black Panther, our brothers and sisters are dying out there. You guys have the weapons and technology, so we can. That's not insanity. That's passion. Earnest passion.
But no,
That's
it's
the
like
mark of a
moral-
good villain.
Yeah, you're right. And the thing is that you're absolutely right. The one thing that I've been beginning to notice quite a lot is that you are giving the villains a reason for being what they are. A lot of movies have actually done that a bit, and Black Panther was one of them. And especially, like you said, Thanos. Thanos, remember in the Infinity War, he says something. He says, what I want to be able to sit down and watch the sunset. I want to basically eliminate half of the universe of its population so that I can have peace, so that I can do this. And even though you listen to that, you see him achieving that at the end, and you realize that this guy has accomplished it, and you would literally see half the universe like whisk out of existence at the end of that flick.
But do you see the difference? Because they're agents of chaos. Joker, Syndrome, those guys are agents of chaos.
Yeah.
Which Thanos and Killmonger are not.
Right.
So okay.
But they do happen to have this particular reason that if you had to sit down and really ponder on it, you are beginning to see their point, especially with the
Who's
Killmonger
they?
character.
Killmonger?
The Killmonger character,
Wait,
right?
it sounds like you're lumping them all. Syndrome and Killmonger. You don't lump them all. I'm saying they're totally separate.
Well, okay, I can see your point of not putting them all into one big pile, but if you have to like examine each and every one of those films that we've discussed, they all have their reasons. Mr. Glass had his reasons for doing what he did. I mean, if you think about it, he caused thousands and thousands of deaths just so that he could get one person in the entire world to point himself out and be his opposite, to be that hero.
Well, more than that, I think he wanted to find superheroes. He believed from a young age that comic books were like history books, and that out there, just like he was breakable, there would be somebody that was his opposite. He wanted to find that person because he thought that the world would need that hero to self-realize, to go out and be a hero. And when he found him, he was overjoyed. He was like, I found my purpose in life. When I met you, I realized who I was, and that completed him. In his mind, he didn't do anything wrong. He was the good guy in his mind, and every good bad guy thinks he's right. Whether it's because you're crazy or because you're logical, because you can divorce your feelings from it. Whatever the case, every good bad guy thinks he's doing the right thing. So as far as moral compass goes, I like the idea that morality is flexible.
Do you think that because we've all just recently seen Incredibles 2, we can put like a movie like Incredibles 2 and the original Incredibles like in one particular category, but put all these other films that are live action into another category? Because, like, for instance, we can like ponder the live action films and give it some real serious thought. Well, this is supposed to be entertainment. The Pixar movies are supposed to be entertainment, and they're animated, and they're computer generated, and they're beautifully designed, and anything is possible. So, can they be separate, or are they the same thing, you think? Well, like for instance, we've discussed right now Mr. Glass, Thanos. We've discussed the James Bond villains, but when we consider Incredibles 2. Some characters are parodies of other characters from the comic book age. There's the concept is like of the villain is probably not as heavy-handed nature-wise. I mean, the villain in Incredibles 2 is Evelyn the Boar.
Okay, hold on. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, that's right.
Before Jesus, you gotta give people a chance to turn it off.
Well, no. Number one, the movie has already come out. It's been out for 2 weeks by the time that this is.
Oh, okay. Well, everybody in the world probably saw it.
Yeah,
Not
but I mean,
all three of our
Do
listeners,
we really want to like?
including you and I,
Yeah.
have seen it, so that's fine.
So we might as well just talk about the movie and the stuff that we enjoy.
Hold on,
about
I
it.
got one more thing I want to get off my mind. So, do you agree that a superhero needs a moral compass? Like, what's this? Because Peter Parker, like, I can't pay my rent. I don't know how I'm gonna pay my school. He could just easily rob a bank, but because of his uncle Ben, he doesn't do a Superman. He could easily do whatever he has to because of Mom and Pa can't. So, do you need a moral compass to keep the hero a good guy?
Well, okay. Again, I think morality should be flexible. It's a bendable, pliable idea. For example, Deadpool. Deadpool isn't necessarily the good guy, but he's the good guy. Why? Because he's doing what he thinks is right, and we're on board with him. It's not that he's morally great. He doesn't have that moral compass. He sort of, he does, but he's not Superman. He's not a Boy Scout, right?
But he has that girlfriend, the love interest. That's his moral compass.
Yeah, she would be the kind of person that would tell him, "Don't do this, don't do that. You're not that type of person. You shouldn't be doing that."
The Punisher had no moral compass, or his family was murdered, so there was no one to say, "Hey."
But is he the hero then? Do you see him as a villain?
That's like saying is Don Corleone a villain, but he actually does pretty good things throughout his life. You guys don't know who Don Corleone is? Yeah, there you go.
He was in Goodfellas, right?
Yeah, the Godfather version, yes. Right.
So I guess where I'm going with this is that isn't Jeebus someone's moral compass? Like I could just as easily rob someone because of Jeebus and read his readings. That's why he keeps the path.
well, I could say, well, yeah, that's why. Now you see why I like Batman. Like, well, now you're just being ridiculous. You're comparing Batman to Jesus. Like, yeah, I'm thinking, well, why can't we compare fictional characters? Whatever it is, we have a moral. These people that we look to, we should follow. Because growing up, my heroes were on TV and comic books.
It's true. If you guys remember the original Batman television series, he was like a walking moral compass. Remember how they could have easily just gone ahead of the people that were in line, and Robin and Batman just get in line like the rest of the citizens that are waiting in line to get to I forget where. And Robin asked Batman, "Gee, Batman, why can't we just get ahead of the line? We're in a hurry." And he goes, "No, Robin, we have to stand in line like good citizens."
I don't know. There's something that's not attractive about that. You want to see him push somebody around once in a while.
Yeah, that's why they never did that.
We like Wolverine. We like, was that guy Venom's the new character now?
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know what the deal.
The movie no one asked for.
There's a lot of people who find that popular. I never have.
All right, so Incredibles 2.
Incredibles 2.
Well, I
Well,
saw it again for the second time.
before we do that, can we talk about the drink? By the way, that's the name of our podcast, Why We Drink. And Michael, would you like to explain the drink that you have?
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have one.
What the?
Oh my God,
Okay,
he
so there it is.
actually finished it.
Art and I have drinks in front of us. They're completely filled. There's a couple sips taken out of each of ours. Roy's
Sips.
gone. He just gulps it down like a pelican. He just. Thank you. Can I have another? All right, what I made is very, very red. I used strawberry pucker and kinky. It's a like a liqueur that's got blood orange and passion fruit and mango. So it's very fruity. So I mixed that with vodka. So I have 3 parts vodka, 1 part strawberry pucker, 1 part kinky, and I mashed up a bunch of strawberries and I mixed that together. And then I put a pineapple in there for yellowness.
And why all those colors? If I can go ahead and point something out.
Because those are the colors of the Dark Knight.
No. In The Incredibles, the costumes of The Incredibles are red and yellow. And a little bit of black. But
use ice because for Frozen?
yeah, we might as well just consider
All
that,
right.
right?
So I put ice in a shaker, put it all together, shook it up, and poured it up.
And it's a very delicious drink, if I may go ahead and say so. We
You
still haven't...
want to take a break and let me make another one for
Yes.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go ahead and make a break. And Mike is going to make Roy a Roy Fried drink. Why don't you tell us how the drink tastes like, Roy?
Awesome. Smooth.
Okay, we're back, everyone.
And
Welcome
we're back.
to Why We Drink. And Roy, would you like to describe the taste of the drink that Michael has made?
Certainly, Art.
Why don't we?
It's
And by the way, you're really going from 0 to asshole in record time, by the way.
I got that engine all ripped up.
Yep.
Taste fruity,
Yep. That's it?
cold, not too alcohol-y. It is incredible.
It's really smooth, I think. And we still haven't figured out the name of it, but we'll figure one out before the end of the broadcast here.
We should do that every week.
Absolutely.
Well, if any of you had any names you think we'll go with this drink, go ahead and tweet it. What's our Twitter handle?
Do we have a Twitter handle?
I don't think we have a Twitter handle. You can make one up.
We have a Twitter. We have a Twitter profile.
I just want to see your reaction.
Damn it.
So, Roy and I went to see the movie with a couple of other friends last Saturday. And Mike, you went to see it, a couple of nights ago or last night?
So, Tuesday night.
Tuesday night.
And
So,
can I just public service announcement? Can you people with little babies
Oh, yes, go for it.
not bring your kid to the theater? Just get a babysitter. Or why don't you stay home?
but wait a second.
Oh,
Isn't this a movie for kids as much as it is for adults?
How much do you remember from movies as a 1-year-old?
I don't remember any
Okay,
at all.
yeah,
You're
stay
right. I
home.
see what you're
Stay
pointing out.
fucking
I see what you're pointing out.
I remember the apple dumpling going.
Well, don't you think that they do bring... You're right. Even when we were over there at the movie theater when we went to see it, there was a baby crying. and it was like just too young of a baby. I say that a kid after the age of 4 is appropriate to bring to this movie,
Sure.
but not a kid that's like 6 months to 2 years old. They're just in their no, 'cause they're just not going to want to sit still. They're not going to want to.
And remember the old days when a baby was crying and the parent would take it out?
Yes, right, in the lobby.
This fucking people, they were just non-stop. These kids were crying.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it out. All right, back to my
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
So the movie is a sequel to The Incredibles from 2004. Believe it or guess, does anybody know how much money it made in its first weekend?
120 million?
More than that, $328 million worldwide, which is amazing. Yeah, Pixar, Disney literally knows how to make these movies, and it was directed and written by Brad Bird, who was the original director of the Incredibles movie. And prior to that movie, he had made another movie that we all loved, which was The Iron Giant, two-dimensional movie.
I liked it.
Yes.
That was a great movie. And he did that one episode called The Family Dog.
For Amazing Stories.
Amazing Stories.
And
Remember that?
if you watch that
No.
episode,
It was a
again-
Steven Spielberg television show
I
back
remember
in
that TV show, but
Yeah.
I don't remember that episode.
It was an animated short where there was a dog and the family they were total assholes to the dog, and then a burglar comes and
The dog doesn't stop the burglar. Yeah.
he becomes a burglar, right?
No, I think that the dog
He's
gets
owned-
taken to like a training school to become an aggressive dog, and the Nazi that trains him is voiced by Brad Bird in the exact same voice that he uses to voice Edna Mole in The
Edna
Incredibles.
Mole.
Edna Mole.
And guest. I you know what? I really believe Brad Bird directed some Batman the Animated Series. So can you check? There's only a way to check that.
He did not direct.
There was only
any
a way to
episode.
check that.
No, I know this for a fact because I'm a fan of the animated Batman animated series.
Okay.
Brad Bird had absolutely nothing to do with
we're
that
thinking
show.
of Bruce Tim.
Yeah, you're thinking about Bruce Timm.
Fuck.
There you go, man. That's the
Alright,
problem with you.
alright.
But the thing about Brad Bird is that I think he's a genius director. The first Incredibles movie, as well as this one, uses this sort of nostalgic American vision, where the cars are all classic cars, where the buildings are all Art Deco. It's done in the style of the 1950s and the 1960s, with this emphasis of technology being ahead of the age, like at least by 50 years. Like, for instance, in the first movie, they did have holographic business cards and iPads. And yet, when you see Incredibles 2, their big screen TVs are still tube TVs. They're not flat screen TVs. So it's a mixture of technology that seems to be working on its own merit.
When did Incredibles come out? 2000.
2004.
When
and
did
this
the
one came out.
iPad come out?
You know what?
I think it came out after the Screensaver. What the hell was that? Screensaver.
When did the iPad come out?
God, I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I don't know.
Shit, there's just a way, some kind of technology we could find that out.
Well, anyways, so we're talking about The Incredibles 2,
Oh, well.
and number one, it's very reflective of a continuation of the original movie because it ends with the Underminer. The first movie ends with the Underminer sort of like popping up, and the family there to save the day. And the second movie opens up with them in that continuation of that scene, and you see this incredible action sequence in which they save the day, but because superheroes are still illegal, they get arrested, and they pretty much are told you can't do this anymore. But there's this nostalgic billionaire, whatever you want to call him, who essentially says, "Hey, I want to bring back supers into this day and age." I think that
Saul actor, right?
yes, Bob Odenkirk, who voices the character of this nostalgic person, who essentially says, "Let's bring the superhero back. Let's get the society to accept you back." And as a representative of that, they decide to go with Elastigirl instead of Mr. Incredible, much to his chagrin because he really wants to be the example, because he's always been the example. Remember how he hated not being a superhero in the first film. In fact, he hated it so much that he was miserable with almost every other aspects of his life. Not being a father, but definitely being an insurance salesman. And then now in this movie, because he's not the center of attention, he says, "Well, let me be a different kind of superhero. I'll be the house mom. I'll be the house mom." And
Or
he
how about
struggles
just
with
the dad?
that.
Yeah, it was-
The house mom, house dad, yeah. but the concept is flipped on its on its end in order to like emphasize the fact that he's staying home. He tries to do something that a superhero would struggle to do, while his wife is actually doing something that, if you see, she enjoys it very much, and she's smart at being the person that she is when she's not with her husband or ganged up with her husband as a team.
I think Incredibles 2 was to the Incredibles franchise what The Force Awakens was to Star Wars, the first original Star Wars. They took all of the elements. They took, a kid on a planet that's a dreamer and has the Force. They took a Death Star. They took like a Darth Vader type character. A Han Solo type character, and they put them all in this thing that really kind of mirrored the first film. So in this movie, in the first movie, there's a time and supers are illegal, and then a rich guy approaches them and says, I'd like to reinstate you. It's the first movie. And then the rich guy turns out to be the bad guy. And then he's got some plot to manipulate people and to sway public perception. And then all the frustrated heroes that were now once separated now come together and they fight the bad guy. So in this movie, there's a time when supers are illegal. And then the rich guy approaches them and offers reinstatement. And then the rich guy turns out to be the bad guy. And then he has a plan to manipulate public perception. And then the broken and fractured superheroes all get together at the end, and then they fight the bad guy and win. Right? That's the basic plot to both films. They just filled it in with different characters. They put Mr. Incredible in the Mrs. Incredible role, and vice versa. I mean, they did some creative things, and it was a really good film. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I loved a lot about it, but I felt like I loved The Force Awakens too. So it felt to me like the same type.
But it wasn't a repeat
It wasn't
per se, but it wasn't new. You're absolutely right about that.
They didn't take the characters and do something new and creative with it. They kind of just put it back in the same.
If you were the writer of The Incredibles 2, would you have gone a completely different route and says it's too similar to the way that it was to the first one? We have to go completely different.
I can't.
Yeah, you really
I can't pretend that I would be better at it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if in a sequel of this magnitude,
Yeah.
that they could have done something that was very much more original.
But my point to what you were saying is that it would be very difficult to, and I guess that you had to kind of like stick with the element, which was, let's face it, any first film before a sequel is made is a template. So if you're going to make a sequel to something, you're going to follow the first template.
Not necessarily. You don't have to do it that way.
There are some creative ways to do that.
There,
but you know
what was good? Was really good at that. What was that movie with that bald muscle guy who was on a planet, and if you stepped into the sunlight or something or the shadows?
You're talking about Riddick.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, Chronicles of Riddick.
So
I
imagine.
hated those movies.
Okay. All right. So the first and second, and I think even the third, were so radically different. And I'm not saying that was a great movie, but I am saying that that's an example of how you take a storyline and you do something completely different with it, or you use the characters in a different way that may or may not work. But they didn't even try it. They weren't experimental about it at all. They're just like, let's stick with the safe framework of the first movie. We'll put all of the different elements together, and then we'll see we're going to make money.
Well, Roy, what did you like about Incredibles 2?
Well, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. There are too many things I liked about it. There's a long list. The one thing I didn't care for was the villainess. I think she slowed down the pace. I think there was an energy going, and then when she appeared, she was just boring. Wow, what was the villain from the first movie? Syndrome. He was like crazy and wild and loud talking, funny. She was just like monotone.
I think that they were trying to like hide her as being the villain up until the very last.
But it slowed down the pace, the energy of the movie.
But as soon as those two came on the scene, I immediately knew they were the bad guy because of the first movie, because they took that turn.
She was the bad guy.
I didn't know she particularly was a bad guy, but I knew two of them were going to be the bad guy.
Right.
Even though I was wrong about him, I knew that she would, like, my attention was diverted towards her immediately, and that kind of took away from the originality of the film.
Yeah, in the marketing of the movie, or at least even in the posters that I've seen of the movie, they always made it seem that the dark figure villain was going to be what in the movie is called the Screen Slaver.
This
And
is like 1961 or something.
right, yeah, if the movie has to be
Screensavers.
dated to a particular year, there is a headline on one of the newspapers that says that the movie takes place in 1962. So it's like an alternate universe. But yeah, the Screen Slaver is supposed to be the villain, but then it turns out to be a ruse because it's really hiding the real villain. Who, if I make a note, when she shows up on screen, I was trying to picture who exactly she was modeled after, and finally it dawned on me that she was modeled, in my opinion, after Angelina Jolie.
I looked at when I watched it again. I was thinking, no, I don't see that. The first time I was thinking, yeah. The second time I was like, no, I don't.
Okay,
see
so
that.
who was she modeled after? If you think
No
about
one. No one. I could.
Not
think
even
of.
Audrey Hepburn, maybe a little bit. No, okay, well then there you go. But it's got. I mean, it looks like Angelina Jolie was when Angelina Jolie was going through her Billy Bob Thornton, I gotta marry this guy forever kind of phase. Yeah, this is before Brad Pitt days.
But my highlight of the movie that I really liked was the end. Was Frozone, where he stepped up twice. Once in the beginning, where the train's gonna go off rail, and Frozone shows up and he ices a track. And the second time, when the yacht is about to crash in, and Frozone steps up and he just freezes the water and slows us, thinking, "Wow, that guy's fucking awesome to come out of nowhere." It reminded me of Han Solo when he came in. Luke.
I have a much better emphasis on
Death Star.
Frozone when he does a very cool thing. Remember when the kids were about to be sort of like the other superheroes that were now under the control of Screenslaver, where they had the goggles that controlled their minds. They appeared at the house, and just as they're about to enter the house and pretty much kidnap the kids, Frozone appears, not as Frozone, but rather his alter ego, and he just shows up and very coolly, he goes through them and says, "That's okay, gentlemen. That's okay. I'll take care of this. You guys just stay back there, and I'll be inside." Very cool move until they go, "No, wait a minute. Now we got to fight you." Well, they now those kids now have someone that defends them. Frozone was there to get their back, to keep their backs. Very cool.
Do you have a favorite part of the movie? Scenes.
I really enjoyed every Jack scene. I laughed out loud, and when he was messing around with
The raccoon.
when Edna Mold, the chemistry between Edna and Jack, I really loved that. I loved that she was the babysitter, and I like her character in general. I love her. I wish they did more with Dash. I really like Dash as a character, and he kind of took a sideline in this movie.
To Violet.
To Violet a little bit, even that was kind of not. It wasn't all that much. There wasn't all that much going on with them.
I kind of wonder if it's more difficult for a writer and a director like Brad Bird to get his animators to sort of like animate them when they're in a home setting, because you could probably take them and put them in an action sequence, and the action sequence is very, very easy to some point to describe to an animator. But imagine having to tell an animator what these people are like when they're around a kitchen table, when they're listening to another person talking at the other end of the room. Because if you watch the movie, you start realizing that there are these little movements. They don't just sit still. These characters are literally moving as they're in the background, and you can either see an eye movement, or you see their lips twirl. You see an animator actually taking the time to animate such things.
Detail,
the attention to detail is so specific that they literally had to create this world where everything had a purpose, and that included just in the background listening to somebody talking in the foreground.
Let me ask you something. Did you think that they made Elastigirl's tits bigger?
Oh yeah, they did.
In the first movie, I rewatched the first movie, and they were kind of flat. And this one, they bounced her out. I don't know what.
I think
that's
because
all
the
about.
outfit gave it lift.
I think that's actually one of those things where they have to show some bouncing because she's elastic.
Well, because it was created by some fancy schmancy designer. Remember they said so. I'm sure whoever designer made it like that. I noticed her butt is big. I know it was big in the first movie, but I appreciate that in the fact that because she had three kids,
Yeah, three
they didn't try to make her slim or model-less. They
They made
kept
her
her as they gave her a mom
Yeah,
figure,
they did.
and clearly that outfit like tried to squeeze everything in together. So I appreciate what they did with her body.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that Mr. Incredible actually got beefier in this flick. Like he looks at least 10 pounds heavier for some reason. I think.
And yet, no time had passed between the first movie and the second.
You know what? I
That
honestly don't
sounds
know.
like a criticism.
But the one thing that they also did is remember when he was losing sleep and you see that like beard growing on him and you see him just tired all the time. You see the circles under his eyes.
I'll give you this. As far as details, there was a moment like when I think that there was some kind of a televised thing where they're talking about what had just happened with maybe it was a news clip or there was a person interviewing something else. They showed Elastigirl and she was on the screen and I was watching. You could see her breathing. Like you could see her chest expand and contract. You see her stomach expand and contract. There was a lot of detail to this movie.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. It's kind of like the remember when we went to see the movie Coco last year, and Coco, the great grandmother, you seriously saw the whiskers in her chin. Like that's incredible design, especially for a character because old grandmothers, they have whiskers growing. You know, it's one of those details that Pixar is able to achieve, but only after years of planning. I think it took about maybe 4 years to complete this movie. It could be longer than that, to be quite honest with you.
It's a testament to quality and detail why you don't take shortcuts. Like again, going to Elastigirl, when she was talking to Bob on the phone when she was in bed that night, she was in her robe.
Yeah.
When she went to lay down on the bed, her robe, a corner of her robe moved.
Yes.
I was thinking, wow.
Yeah.
If you're like, it's like if you're an animator, like okay, it's done. Like make that little corner. Like who's gonna effing notice? Who cares? It matters.
You know,
It's like a Michelin. It's a 3-star Michelin work.
I will go even farther than that. There's a lot of drinking in this flick. They actually make themselves some mixed drinks and they pass it to each other, and you see the villainess actually drinking her drink. I'm almost positive. Yeah.
like old fashions.
I am almost positive that the animators must have learned how to make that drink. They must have figured out how to mix the colors so that they can make it look perfectly right on screen. Because otherwise it would just look false.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing that Pixar movies want to make anything, even though everything on the screen is false. It's computer generated stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever seen Elastigirl drinking, right?
And she's drinking in this flick.
Oh yeah.
And not only that, but there is this moment where the brother, Dash, he turns on the TV because they're at the motel, and it's a Godzilla movie. And you could just tell that it's a guy in a costume. It was like the original Godzilla movies from Japan, and it's a black and white movie. And if you look at it, they must have at some point or another designed that screen to represent a guy in a suit.
You know what? I think The Incredibles is made for our age range because with the Outer Limits,
Yes.
who would know?
Absolutely.
Anybody would know the Outer Limits except our age.
That's why you can't bring a little baby to the screening of a movie like The Incredibles.
But they wouldn't know that.
They would, yeah. That's why you gotta. That's why if you take a kid who's like older than 4, then you gotta like sit them down and kind of like say, "This is what makes this so cool. Let me show you some more stuff." But the thing about it is that a kid has got to digest this, and they can't digest it if they're too young.
So leave your
leave your
brat kids at home. God damn it!
But
There's
you're right.
no reason to bring them.
This movie was actually made, I think, for adults, and I think the original was made for adults, just the same way that when Brad Bird made the Iron Giant, that was really for adults. It wasn't for kids.
Oh, I know what I want to tell you guys about a pace and how a character can slow down a pace. Black Panther. Like the tribe, the country, Killmonger, all that was like, wow, this had high energy. But when the Black Panther came on screen, he's like, he had this, again, another monotone. It's like,
He was
Killmonger,
he was a little
and
bit
then
of a
he
control
it spiked. Like, oh, now Killmonger's back. The energy's high again, and then bring back the tribe, the country, and then here's Black Panther, and then he brings back. And I'm like, I find myself falling asleep.
Oh,
during Black Panther, and I fell asleep when I saw The Incredibles 2 for the second time. I fell asleep, almost fell asleep during that. What was her name? The villain.
Evelyn.
Thank you. I found myself almost falling asleep. I was thinking, she's bringing this pace down, just like Black Panther did.
I don't think that she was an interesting villain. I don't
agree.
think so. Yeah.
That was the one thing that I really didn't like about it, was that her motivation was weird. So what happened was she and her brother run a company like DevTech or something like that it's called, and
The father.
when they were young, the father was really deeply involved with superheroes. But when the superheroes became illegal, someone breaks into their house, and then he tries to contact one of the superheroes. He decides that he will put his trust in the superhero that is going to come to save him, rather than go into a safe room where his wife was trying to lead him, and the result is he gets shot and killed. So the brother, while he sees that as a reason to then reinstate superheroes and get them back because that was why his dad died, she sees it as a reason as to get rid of all superheroes because self-reliance is more important than dependence on superheroes. If you depend on somebody to save you all the time, they're going to let you down because you should be depending on yourself, which is a valid point.
Yeah, very nice valid point.
But she becomes the screenslaver.
Yeah.
And she negates her own point by because as soon as you take over somebody else's mind and you control them, they no longer have the capability of saving themselves. They no longer have the capability of making choices on their own in order to save themselves. So she kind of negates her own point. She proves that superheroes are needed. And so that makes her a weirdly ineffectual bad guy.
Yeah, and the other thing is that there is this cleverness to the script that eventually happens because it introduces other villains, I mean not villains, but other superheroes that are now coming out of the woodwork. Younger and fresher superheroes, because let's face it, in the first movie, a lot of the old...
What about that old...
Well, wait a second, that's the point. That's the point that I'm trying to make. In The Incredibles, a lot of the existing superheroes were eventually eliminated by Syndrome. So now these are new superheroes that are now coming out, and they were afraid to come out, but now because there seems to be this flow of acceptance to superheroes, people like Void and the Crusher and the Elderly Reflux, yeah, that guy, they show up, and you start noticing that they are the new breed, but they are used against the Incredibles by Screenslaver in order to make them into the bad guys for a moment. That's actually pretty clever, I thought. The other thing is that one thing that I want to point out is the one character that seems to stand out of that new generation of superheroes is Void, that is voiced by Sophia Bush. But I actually think that she was modeled after Jenny McCarthy.
Okay.
No, she wasn't.
Oh my God, you don't think so? Okay, fine.
No, she wasn't.
You don't even know who I'm talking
Yes,
about.
I know who Jenny McCarthy is. I know
Yeah,
Void
Michael,
is.
do you know who
It's
Jenny
like,
McCarthy
no.
is?
She made that vodka, that lemon vodka we had.
I can't remember.
No.
Okay, and Reflux is definitely an older, but he has a very disgusting capability.
He should get his own movie.
Yeah, he
That guy's funny.
throws up lava, which is very. I mean, I saw that, and he it was just clever the way that guy was.
I love that he's an old guy.
And I think
Like
the
us.
one that looks like an owl, I think his name is Screecher. And remember that when the door opens, his head is completely turned backwards, and he kind of like turns back, like very clever. And of course, the Crusher. Remember how when the Crusher uses his powers against Mr. Incredible, and then he's brought back to being a good guy again. Mr. Incredible happens to ask him, well, can you uncrush this? And he goes, wait, you want me to uncrush it? I'm called a crusher. I crush things. I've never uncrushed before. Like, well, and finally realizes, I can't waste time with you. But it's true. How is it that you can, like, crush something, but never try to uncrush it? Maybe you do have that talent.
Whoa, that's one of those trees in the forest.
How many roads does a man have?
Okay, both of you are going from 0 to absolute record time. Well, first of all, that's one of the things that I loved about the movie. That Brad Bird was clever enough to put those elements into the script and actually put incredible paint to canvas with this movie.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
They were kind of vanilla. I mean, it was fun to see other. They were just there. They didn't really added much to the film. I think that the heart of the film lied in the characters we already loved. So whenever we saw Jack or Dash or Violet or Mr. and Mrs. Incredible on the screen and they were engaged in some way, that's when it became a great movie. Everything else kind of made it pale. I think whether it was the villain or all those extra superheroes, all of those guys kind of watered it down for me. I felt like I'd rather see a lot more of the family dynamic than just that. Yeah, and so and plus, like in the final climax, Elastigirl goes up and she's in a plane and she confronts the final conflict between her, and it just ends like that. It's sort of like she shoots a hole in the plane, she gets sucked out. It's like, well, the end. Wait, that was it? Like she was trying to land it, she couldn't land it. Then she jumps out and tries to save Catherine Keener.
You thought that's it? No, I didn't think that was that. I thought they could. Yeah, I thought it was.
It felt like instant. Like it was.
It would have been instant if, like, she shot the window, she flew out. That's it for the villain.
That's what it felt like.
No, even after she jumped out after her and grabbed her, and that girl made the portals.
That felt more. That felt more like the climax epilogue than the climax itself, because the climax should be, good versus evil, and this is where it reaches its head, and so we want to see that. There's got to be some real clash and conflict, and here it was just she shot a hole in the thing, it was over. The rest of it was epilogue. It was just her.
I disagree.
I think everything was into that boat, trying to stop that boat from hitting the sea. That was the whole excitement, right?
But that's
It's turning the rudders.
The train, the boat, the motorcycle chase scenes, all of that was as good as the first one in terms of action. I was so engaged in those scenes. It was really well done. At no point was I confused. Like, wait, what just happened? Even during the the epilepsy scenes. People are talking about with the flashing.
Yeah, you're talking about that room.
It still never lost control over my understanding of what was going on. Like sometimes it gets just too busy and you don't know, you can't really tell what's happening. This kept you in the moment. You knew exactly what was happening and you were engaged with it. I love that. They did a really good job at the action scenes.
I think it took about 4 years for them to complete this movie, probably longer than that, but they definitely returned quite a lot of the elements from the first movie over to the second movie without skipping or missing a beat. The script was just as clever as before. And I have to say that the production design is just stellar. I love the way that they make this movie look.
It was beautifully made. I will say, nice camera angles, lighting.
I really wish America was like that. Which is really weird because
Batman started the animated series.
The animated series looks very similar to that, without a doubt. You're absolutely right about
the
that.
old surround environment with modern technology.
By the way, Michael, you listen to NPR. Do you know the name Sarah Vowell? Vowell? She's a host on an NPR show, I think. Well, she's the one that voices in The Incredibles, the daughter. What is the name of the daughter? Violet. Yeah. Brad Bird pretty much liked the way she sounded and just decided to cast her. She's never done a movie other than The Incredibles and this new sequel where she just does a voice as a character, Violet. And by the way, Violet has quite a lot of growing pains in this flick because she's angry at her dad. And remember, there's that sequence where he's talking to his wife while he's in the kitchen, and then the invisible girl, Violet, just walks, gets ice cream, grabs a spoon, and then just disappears, goes back to her room. That, again, is a clever thing for the script to have done.
Yeah, NPR is probably one of the few radio stations that has the most speech impediments per broadcaster.
Very, very.
They stutter. It sounds like they got mouths full of marbles sometimes. No, but I love NPR.
Sure, I love NPR too. I listen to it quite some
They
time.
just have that library, like, welcome to NPR News 4. And today is we're talking to Harmony. And like,
We're talking to our
are you in a library?
Yeah, exactly. They know how to control their levels over there. So, have we decided on what we're going to call this drink?
Oh, are we done talking about Incredibles 2?
I don't know.
They look at tweet.
So, wait,
A name for our-
but before we finish, themes. The themes in the first movie were so normal versus special. People are normal, people are special. Should people that are special be forced to lower their standards to normalcy? Dash
Dash, yeah, the father
has that
points out.
issue, and
Yeah.
he's like, why can't he go out for sports?
Exactly.
You know, so there's a theme throughout the movie about being true to who you are, right? That's a powerful theme, and it runs through the movie.
And you know what? The father makes the exact same point again in this second film when he does that joke about math. Remember that the Dash is asking him to teach him the new math, the way that the school wants them to learn new math now. And he goes, why should they change math? Math is math. He's basically talking about himself. It's like, why should I change? I'm a superhero. I should be out there saving lives. Why should I change?
Thematically, in the first movie, I think it was a much stronger and more powerful draw. In this film, yeah, there's things like that, but like in this film, like the theme is probably something more along the lines of are you dependent on superheroes versus should you be self-reliant? And the characters, the dad and the mom, have to learn to be self-reliant. They can't depend on each other, right? The idea of the villain and her dilemma with her father that died because he didn't just take matters into his own hands. He depended on somebody else. I don't feel that was as powerful of a theme as the first movie. I'm sorry that I'm comparing the two. I shouldn't be. I really shouldn't be. We should be talking about this as a single film.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't want to, because something as great as our favorite movie, you know, the best superhero movie in our opinion, it's not fair to compare this movie to that movie. It's in no way as good. I don't think that it is as good as the first film, if for no other reason is that the first film was an original. In the middle of a sea of superhero films, it stood apart, and it made a mark. And so many people are going to see it because of that nostalgia.
I'm glad there wasn't singing in it. I hate singing in my animated films. I effing hate singing in animated films. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, you're glad that this wasn't a musical, you mean?
Fuck those animated musicals.
Well, you know what? There's a quick story that I know for a fact. The movie The Fantastic Four, which was a 2005 superhero film, you know, it was the one with Jessica Biel. She was in it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it turns out that the people who were making that movie found themselves completely and utterly screwed when The Incredibles premiered in 2004. What? Well, the people who were making Fantastic Four thought that they were making a really great movie. And then they saw The Incredibles, which was released a few months before the release of Fantastic Four, and they realized that it was a far superior movie than the one that they had made.
Even if The Incredibles didn't come out, they actually looked at that. This is fucking awesome.
Exactly.
What we're making.
Yeah, if you
Oh my
think about it,
God.
can you imagine them suddenly panicking and probably begging the studio give us more money to make a much better ending, and then saying no, you've already shot your ending, we're not going to spend any more money.
Everything else is fine except that ending.
There was nothing fantastic about the Fantastic Four. Yeah, that was the one thing about it. I'm not talking about the reboot. I'm talking about the 2005 version. You know, the movie that came out.
and the Captain America.
Captain America, Chris Evans as the Human Torch, right? Exactly. But that is a famous story that, you know, they went to see the Pixar movie. They went to see Incredibles, and they realized, holy fucking shit, we're screwed. Yeah.
It's because you wouldn't hire writers. You just need you just need good writers. That's all.
Let's face it. At the time, they thought they had a great script.
DC too. DC's fallen to like, what are we doing wrong? We have all this money. Hire good writers. You fucking dumbasses.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I kind of like living in this day and age where superhero movies are now out, and there is a viable way to compare the DC universe with the Marvel universe. because you realize that they are doing it right in one half, and then the other half they're just like struggling to make it work.
You know what DC is going through? I found is that DC is going through a Marvel. Do you remember when Marvel brought out the X-Men, and then they brought out Ghost Rider,
Yeah.
and then they brought out Daredevil, and they had those crappy
Yeah, those were
shit movie. I think those were Sony.
Yeah,
Were
they were
those,
Sony-
they're
owned by
bringing out
Sony,
those
yeah.
shitty. DC is going through their Sony phase of bringing out shit movies. And I think they're gonna have. I don't know when it's gonna happen, but they'll have their moment where they're like, "Hey, we're actually bringing out top quality movies." The only one they brought is The Dark Knight, the Heath Ledger, and the
true.
Christian Bale.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. But the thing about The Incredibles is that they definitely were the type of film that sort of inspired. It was the first movie was pitch perfect. The second movie, in my opinion, is just as good as the first one. Has a few elements that I probably would not have done, but to be quite honest with you, there was no other way of doing it the way that they did. And I think Brad Bird is going to be regarded as a really great director a couple of decades from now. They're going to be like, his movies were the best. Even the movies that seem to have failed in his career, like Tomorrowland, the one with George
never saw
Clooney.
that.
Yeah, if you watch it, it's beautifully designed, it's beautifully acted, incredible special effects. It's amazing. And it has quite a lot of elements that are just within the same pace as the Incredible movies.
I didn't think it was as good.
Tomorrowland?
No. Incredibles 2 versus Incredible 1. And like I said, I really feel bad. I don't want to compare 1 and 2 because 1 was so good that it's difficult to really live in the shadow of that movie. But like in this movie, there were certain plot holes. Like Mrs. Incredible goes out and she's, fighting crime. And then like the screenslaver, she sees that when the guy that controls the train sees the screen, he's controlled. And that he made it go backwards and made it do all the things he did. And then suddenly he snaps out of it when he's not looking at the screen. She sees that. Then she sees that other dude.
The talk show.
Yeah, the talk show guy sees his screen and becomes like, I'm speaking for screenslaver. She sees that he sees a screen and he's controlled. She goes in the back. She sees that the entire crew is looking at screens and they're all controlled.
But those are which is flashing. Those.
Yeah, whatever. But she sees, but they're being controlled by sight.
Okay.
And then she goes and finds the screenslaver, and then she chases him down, and he's got goggles, and she pulls the goggles off, and all of a sudden he realizes he's just a pizza delivery guy, and she's like, no, he's a screensaver. There's no way he's a regular pizza delivery guy. He's fucking the screenslaver. Like,
But she didn't know about the odd goggles until afterwards. Remember when she's looking at the video footage?
It just
of, like,
seems odd that someone that smart and with that much on the ball, because until that point, she's like on the ball and everything. She's so sharp and figures things out so quickly that she didn't figure out that the goggles were flashing in the dude's
Not
eyes.
at that moment.
It just didn't seem like it was. It was very unlike her as a character. I don't think that she would
eventually
not
got
have
there.
known. Eventually, she did, but
Okay.
but she should have gotten it right away. I don't think.
Yeah, you're nitpicking.
No, I'm not. I think that as a character, she should have known. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It didn't seem in her. If she was being true to character, that she would have known.
You don't think that she was riding the euphoria of having caught a villain? Remember how she was caught in the euphoria of being Elastigirl?
Yeah, I agree. I think
I think she's smarter than that.
By the way, the name of the character of the villainess in this flick is, her name is Evelyn Dever. And if you actually think of her name, it's Evil Endeavor.
Clever.
Once again, praise to Brad Bird. Look at the...
Did you come up with that, or is that?
No, it's in here.
I thought Art came up with that.
Yeah.
Somebody on YouTube said it.
One thing that we didn't really talk about was the amazing sequence between Jack, the baby, and this fighting raccoon.
Yeah.
You know, it's like he's watching television.
Why
and
didn't he just eye blast that thing into half? Like he just didn't slice.
He didn't know how to use his powers. He's a baby. He wouldn't know these things.
things out at that moment.
Once again, you're nitpicking. First of all, you're complaining about the babies at the movie theater, but yet but now you're complaining about the baby on screen.
Consider us a smart audience.
Wait a minute. Did they not see in the first movie when syndrome
No.
took Jack Jack up in there. They didn't see that Jack Jack turned.
No,
oh,
you didn't see
okay.
that turn, right? Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Which is another bit of a plot hole because at the end, remember that Jack puts on a mask just as
Yes.
right. So I'm trying to explain myself why he would have a mask, and then all of a sudden the family doesn't know that he's got powers, and I'm assuming that they just gave him a mask to
For
you
the
know.
audience?
No, they just gave him a mask because he's a baby. He wants to be included with the family. So hey, let's give him a
What
mask
did he have?
too.
Like 14 different powers? in this?
17 at the end of the movie. They said the first 17 powers.
Jesus.
Excellent drink, by the way, Mike. I just finished it.
Glad you like it.
Yeah.
You just now finished the first drink.
You, on the other hand, have finished that's your fifth one, right? You know, I'm going to propose something. I think that I should drink, get drunk, and then we should start recording and see what I'm like as a drunk broadcaster.
Oh
I
boy.
mean, I'll do the Jaeger bombs. Remember how we said we should use the Jaeger bombs?
That's interesting.
Yeah. I'll do 5. I'll do 5.
No,
Screw my
I'm not
diabetes.
gonna do 5.
I'll go into a coma
Driving home.
and screw driving home. One of you guys will drive me home.
Yeah, I'll drive home.
So, have we decided what we're going to call this magic drink of yours, Mike? I have one idea.
What's your idea?
We should just let's just call it the Incredible.
That's too obvious. Call it the bird or something like that.
How about the Jack?
That's
What else then?
Is there Jack Daniels in it?
okay.
The Frozone.
Oh, how about we call it the Reflux? After the elder, the Reflux.
Remember that song by Duran Duran?
No.
The Reflux.
It's a Reflux. Making it obvious here.
What's our Twitter handle? While you guys are thinking of.
WhyWeDrink.com or
Yeah,
Why We
what's
Drink
our-
hashtag.
By the way, I should mention this. The website for the podcast is podcast.subjectivetruthpictures.com. Podcast.subjectivetruthpictures.com. So you can either do that. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Google Play. So hopefully you guys will check us out.
Let's see. In our Twitter handle, we welcome all followers and posts rather they're negative. Like you guys suck. You guys are awesome.
No,
keep
go ahead.
up.
You
Keep
can
the
tell
word.
us
Art, yours,
Yeah, yeah.
Hanson.
It is at Why We Drink and the number 1. That's WHYWEDRINK 1.
1.
That's our Twitter handle.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone. Have a good weekend. Roy Torres, thank you for joining us this
All right.
evening. Mike Cabrera, thank you for a beautiful drink.
Hold on, everyone. We're not done.
What happened to the stars? Are we rating this thing?
I give it 4 out of 5
You give it
stars.
4 out of star. I actually am going to go and say that it's a perfect film. Just like
5
the first
stars?
movie. So 5 out of 5. Yeah.
I'm gonna go 4.5 out of 5.
Wow.
It was good. I really enjoyed it. I walked out of there. I laughed a lot. I enjoyed watching it again. It was great. I loved watching it. But if I had to compare it to the first, it's not as good.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. That's right.
So yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
And this is why we drink.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.